In her book on totalitarianism, Hannah Arendt talks about something I thought was very unique in that she compared Darwin's theory of evolution to Marxism and felt that there was a commonality. Perhaps if I can describe briefly what she was talking about there. She talked about, of course, about the survival of the fittest and the use of the dialectic from Marxism, that you would come to a one-party state, and made the illusion that through that homogeneity, that in essence it's our death warrant as a species, as an environment. And so we need to make sure, and here are my words, we need to make sure that there is always a diversity, because the diversity is that component that actually spurs life on. And with that, I looked at this in retrospect as being the impetus for this series that we've started. Is called "It's in Our Nature," which infers that nature being something that's dispositional, we are born this way, which I believe is quite indicative if we look at it from that perspective. And our intention here is to look at those things that we take for granted every day that are actually very special. And so we wanted to hold conversations to give people the opportunity to talk about how special it actually is for them. And I was very, very blessed to have Elsa Raubenheimer, Lilienfeld, and Zsofia Nagy with me for this interview, and or better said, a discussion. Yeah, I was very touched by that of what was said. And of course, that left me with memories that I've been carrying around ever since that talk took place. And I hope that you find this as insightful as I did. So thanks for joining.
Thank you, Mike, and very good to be here as usual. So, who am I? Human being, a supply chain expert as such, trying to help companies, small, medium-sized companies, and startup scale-ups to get on their sustainability journey in supply chain and operations as much as possible. Of course, we all know the hurdles. At least I believe the community that's listening to our work is well aware of this. So that's why I say as much as possible, but we are trying our best. And of course, how I relate to the subject is I truly believe that we are part of nature, and we need to think as being part of that bigger system that nature provides for us, and not to control as humanity. And that's where we went completely wrong. And quite frankly, I hold this thought since I was kind of 10, maybe. So that's quite a long time, because I'm not 20. I'm also more of the elderly by now. So yeah, I'm really happy to have this discussion, because harboring these thoughts throughout my life, discussing with a few people here and there. Sometimes you'll find people who really agree with you, they are on the same page, but it's really rare. It's just good to share with others as well. And then I hope to inspire others to think about the topic, think about, even if they don't share the point of view, just to give it a thought, and maybe think about it from a different perspective. So I hope to get that with this conversation. Thank you.
Wonderful, Sophia. Thank you very much. Elsa, perhaps if you can give us a description from your side and your relationship to the subject.
Yes, I'm from a different generation, and for us, nature, or anybody who was really interested in nature and regarded it as is now a lot more acceptable as not so much a force to control as something to respect. Anyone who thought that way was seen as a little bit of a hippie and not quite a serious person often, unless they were writing a doctorate on the subject, or just showing that they were a serious person in some other way. It was for me mainly in poetry that I connected with nature, because I was a city girl and grew up in the city. Eventually realizing, just through connecting with nature from time to time, what immense power it had to restore our equilibrium in a way, emotionally, spiritually. And that had such an effect that I sort of filed it away a bit and got on with life, occasionally being reminded of it. And it is such a luxury in my later life now to have the time to connect with nature. I'm realizing that I'm still at the stage where I tend to try and find an excuse to connect, such as photography or, going to observe something. And whereas I would very much like it to become more part of my life on a daily basis, as it should be. And I think something that Mike has mentioned in our little discussion beforehand about the issues that people are experiencing in the current climate of COVID, and there's just so much mental strain, shall we call it, at the moment, that if we could connect with nature, it's guaranteed to connect us with each other as well, and to give us peace that we can't find for ourselves without a kind of foundation which nature can provide. That's sort of my thoughts at this stage.
Well, that was extremely touching. Thank you very much for that, Elsa. Can I ask you a follow-up question, Elsa? You are, like all of us in Zsofia as well, we are confronted with influences from different culture, and that comes by choice, that we embrace the world, that we threw ourselves into situations where the culture was very possibly and most likely very different than the one that we went through as a child. And I think that especially the ones that play a major part in your life, one being Africa and the other one being Australia, from this cultural perspective, I'm always looking at it from the U.S. lens, where it was drilled into us that nature is something that we control, because nature is dangerous. And let's be honest, there are a lot of calamities that take place weather-wise within North America. And so that was all part and parcel of the way that we thought. And certainly the goal was to always have the upper hand. Now, you came from a culture that, and please correct me if I'm wrong, didn't necessarily have that same attitude. But in my mind, and again, please correct me if I'm wrong, but Australia is anything but, I think, follows more the US line of thinking. Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts on that?
It's actually a very interesting question. So my background, although I'm from Africa, I come from an Afrikaans background, so a very, very Calvinistic, very controlled background. Even our schools were extremely controlled, and it sort of never really sat well with me, because this mini culture was within the rest of Africa. And so we saw the power of nature. We saw how my African people, and that's such a generalization, but how African people connect with nature, as opposed to how this small little group protected themselves basically and tried to control everything. So it's such a massive contrast that anybody who thinks about what's happening around them will start weighing those two things up against each other and go, why is this happening? Why are we so afraid of anything that's not controllable? Why do we feel we have to plant things in rows before we can relax around them? And so that's the first influence. And then I moved to Australia, home of the accepted as the oldest culture, with 40,000 to 60,000 years of continued what would you call it, inhabitants by the culture, the Aboriginal, the indigenous culture, and a totally different approach to the land, which I will talk about in a minute. But the government is still very much, as you say, as the US, as the UK, very controlling, not particularly nature focused at all, quite pollutant, not looking forward in this, in terms of climate, and it's not a nature focused community at the top. When I say at the top, I'm just talking about government. Whereas the actual indigenous culture is extremely nature focused. So the view is that we do not own the land owns us. We cannot own the land because we are just here as servants. We're custodians. We're nothing more than that. And our job is simply to look after it for the next generation and for the next generation. And that I feel really comfortable with. Land ownership is such a strange concept once you start thinking about it seriously. Yeah, so Mike, in a way, I'm very much caught between contrasting cultures.
Zsofia, you didn't directly tell me this. I picked this up on one of the conversations we had, not too dissimilar to today, where we were introducing each other. And again, please correct me if I'm wrong. You were raised within a regenerative household, that it was a big subject for your mother, this idea of regeneration. So that meant that was part of your standard. That was the way that things were supposed to be done. And then you went into the great wide world, and you found out, I'm again making some assumptions, that not everybody has this standard. How did you deal with that?
As much as you said it was an assumption, it was a correct one, Mike, number one. So yeah, I mean, look, for me, of course, just a little bit linking back to what Elsa said about land ownership, right? I come from an ex-communist country, Hungary, obviously. And there, the relationship of people and land, because everything was taken away from them, right? So that became state-owned, right? Whatever was privately owned became state-owned. At the age of my grandparents, right? And that was quite a trauma for many people. With that said, it was also, shaping the mentality of people around. Either people went into the direction of from that traumatic experience, they either went into the direction of, okay, look, we are custodians, as you said, Elsa, and then we just need to take care of that as much as possible and leave it to the next generation. Or they went into that more toxic thought process and set of thoughts saying we need to reclaim that land, right? Well, again, it's, it depends on your family and your family values and where the family comes from. But my family, as you pointed out, Mike, was quite focused on how we lived in a regenerative way, and making sure that the knowledge and the insights from that layer of the community from my grandparents was passed on to the other generations, right? So back to your question, Mike, how I coped with this massive slap on the face. I can share that quite openly. That was a huge slap on the face for me, and yeah, it made me a bit closed up. I did not really talk about these things with many people, only when I felt safe, as we say in this community here, which was really rare. Not many people shared, these views, and at the same time, I felt an increasing, kind of sense of I need to start sharing these things, because I truly believe that this is what is missing. So of course I had to bury many of these things to survive. I don't come from an extremely wealthy family, so I had to survive, right, and make ends meet to be able to live myself. But at the same time, as I went through the years, I just thought, what, this is wrong. And what I knew was wrong already at the age of 10, 14, because that's already, I saw all of these things already. I'm like, this is wrong. This is completely wrong. Because even back then, and I'm going to mention just one aspect that I got throughout how my mother shared all of this information with me. Back then in the 70s and the 80s, there were climate studies already mentioning, how people wanted to control, for instance, when the rain falls, right? So we wanted to control rainfall, we wanted to control wind, and etc. And I was horrified. I'm like, no way, this is the wrong way. Stop. I wanted to put up the stop sign. It's wrong way, end of the road, don't go there. And I just didn't see, any traction. So yes, it was a huge slap on the face, got horrified, not really, a bit of, retracting like a little crab, and then trying to make ends meet. But again, I got to a point where I just said, you know what, I don't really care what people think. I just need to share this, and this needs to come back to life, because that's the right way of living in harmony with nature, not controlling it. We are really part of it. And quite frankly, as you said, Elsa, again, nature is superior versus humanity. It's not the other way around. So I also made it kind of part of my job and role as a human being, as a professional, to educate people around me about these things. I'm not as vocal as I could be or should be at this point, but I think as I'm gonna grow a little bit older, it's gonna come. So yeah, Mike, that's basically the feedback I can give to everybody, that the load of the feedback from me and the educational, mess of educational materials just coming. So that can be expected.
I think you're very modest, Zsofia, as far as passing the word, and thank you very much for that. I'd like to see if we can make it a little bit more free flowing, the conversation. Maybe make a bit of a confession from my end, or I don't know if confession is the right word, or realization, better said, because I think about this subject a lot, and I've come to the conclusion that if we say that we're part of nature, and that obviously there's an effect of what we do, and you both gave great examples of that the inverse also takes place. If we take these concepts of nature controlling and nature accepting, doesn't that apply to ourselves? To what degree we try to control ourselves as being a reflection of that? And conversely, to what degree are we capable of accepting ourselves? And I'm just riding the wave that you set, Zsofia, and what you said. Are we capable of actually accepting ourselves, accepting the situation, also nature, right? Accepting the situation and realizing that is a form of self-fulfillment. Your thoughts, please feel free.
Go ahead, Elsa, if you want. I also have a couple of things to say. So quite frankly, I think we need to start where you said, Mike. It's everything is interconnected, and by allowing control to release our, even within ourselves, I think we can find a better control that way, right? So I think we just need to unlearn and relearn what control means for us, and how that would work. Maybe that's how I would approach it, because nature has a really gentle yet very structured control in place that people just don't see. And it's amazing. And I mean, look, I don't want to, just flower the whole thing all around, but I realized throughout my life that whenever I was completely out of line, somehow nature taught me that, hey, first of all, there was a warning sign that I was way out of line, and secondly, how to correct it. So it was structured but gentle at the same time. So it was not kind of that guilt tripping, controlling type of repercussion, but more like, hey, you're wrong, but this is the way. So, I mean, I'm really interested in your thoughts about this, Elsa, because I think maybe it's just too personal to leave it like that. But yeah, that was for me. But thank you, Mike. I think it's really, really important to discuss from that perspective. It's critical.
I find that very interesting because what you basically, or what I'm getting from that, is that you're saying that nature is very much a force in our lives, and obviously it is, but I'm talking about a personal force. That's what Mike was also saying. And it's not petty, although it's incredibly powerful. It hasn't got any of that petty and complicated nonsense that we have in our other relationships. This is pretty straightforward. It's at a level that we can't fault, not even if we try. And the best way to deal with it is probably to just step back and accept what it's trying to teach us.
Yeah, I was thinking a little bit about what Sophie said, tied to the unlearn and relearn. That sounds like an educational process. What do you think, Elsa?
Absolutely, yes. And the best educators are those that are empathic and can actually understand their pupils and who are willing to learn from their pupils. And nature seems to be the perfect educator. It's using us as instruments without being controlling, but allowing us to work for our own good.
What do you both think? What do you both think that we need to unlearn? Maybe not necessarily as personally, but we as collective humanity.
Go for it, Elsa, and chip in.
Yeah, so probably the first thing is that instinct that we need to be in control. And I keep coming back to that word. It's such a destructive way to deal with life, to feel as if we need to control it. And I think Zsofia just said something about how we're unlearning certain behaviors and how nature is going to teach us those lessons in a way. It's the moment you accept what is coming towards you, and without judgment go, okay, here is a force that is so superior to me that I can trust it. I don't have to look for ulterior motives or anything. I can just wait and let it teach me what I need to learn. If one can do that, it just makes it becomes uncomplicated. It doesn't have to be that difficult. It's having to learn to trust again, because we've been so messed around by politics and general forces and the people around us that we no longer trust. We feel we can't trust anybody or anything. And here is something that is intrinsically good, and therefore our survival as well, not just for its own survival, because we're all connected, as you say.
Could not agree more, quite frankly. Can I just add one more thing here, Elsa? And I think that directly links back to what you said about, basically allowing nature to teach us in this gentle way, and interconnectedness between two or multiple human beings. That's also, I think, what we need to unlearn and relearn. I think right now we have almost perfect negative examples when people start saying, oh, why would I care that certain people have problems paying the bills because of inflation, right? That's just almost a daily topic in the news, right? Or lack of sensitivity around the war in Ukraine, or vice versa, even oversensitivity, right? And I think there we need to again unlearn that there is no hierarchy in humanity. We are all equal as human beings, and nature will not favor anyone above another human being, right? So maybe it goes back to this false interpretation of the theories of Darwin earlier, right? Where we learned about survival of the fittest, but it was never about between two human beings, right? It was more about how we collectively benefit from the improvement that we can reach as a species, right? So for me, that's also, it has so many layers. I'm sorry, Mike, I don't want to go into a lot of details or a myriad of different areas, but it all links back to the same topic as we mentioned. It's just how we relate to each other, right? There's no, I'm not a second-class citizen, or I'm not a first-class citizen, etc. So these things we definitely need to unlearn and then relearn our place in nature and society altogether. And there again, what you said, Elsa, will definitely be one of the most important parts where we can guide ourselves in this process through the change.
There was a quote that I ran across recently. I can't remember exactly where it was, that if you were to ask the populace, they would much prefer to live in misery as long as that misery was predictable, and that meaning that the fear of the unknown being the largest, the biggest fear that we have. And so if we follow that and this idea of controlling, and these are all interlinked, that we're trying to perform risk management all the time, although we're trying to manage things that we can't manage. This is all smoke and mirrors. But the fact is, it's all tied to this fear that we have that something's going to happen that we cannot control, and we would rather be in terrible relationships because at least that's something that we have. We would rather have somebody telling us something that has nothing to do with the truth, simply because at least that's something that we could hold on to. So when I think about these types of conditions that we have, and I truly believe that they're all there, it makes it very difficult for us to unlearn this thing that we're talking about, right? So how do we do this? And I know I'm asking the impossible of both of you.
Don't ask me. I necessarily just can say one thing that I learned myself via my experience, and that's very simple yet very frightening. Is basically the moment I try to over control and risk manage everything around myself, then 100% I'm gonna run into more difficulties than when I just start trusting the process, that we have enough, good forces from nature and good enough resources, that if I'm willing to live with harmony and kind of follow that flow, then it will come together, even if I don't see that yet. So for me, the best example is that most of my career, I'm honest, I'm not talking about these things very much or very often because people start laughing or they don't believe me. But that's true. I never really knew what the next step will be. I couldn't plan. And quite frankly, if I ask others, even young ones right now around me, they confirm the same. And I just tell them, you know what, just go with the flow. And maybe you don't see why things that you have to do now are good for you, but trust the process, and you will see it maybe 6 months, 12 months, 2 years down the line. If it's completely against your values, or you feel a conflict developing inside yourself, which is kind of, I try to, sorry, I just try to adjust my camera, but you can see it, like, or feel it, like right here, right, and in your stomach. So if every day becomes really, really complicated, you have that heavy feeling in your stomach every day, then definitely nature is telling you that you're in the wrong direction. So then you need to change. But if things feel all right, you're not feeling every day down mentally, in your heart, and how you feel physically as well. And then that's a large part of it, by the way, I think, where we completely disconnected from nature, in terms of how we sense ourselves and how we process the feedback in terms of what we are doing. So if things are aligned, you feel good, then even if you don't understand how those will benefit you, and you don't see the immediate benefit, that immediate gratification, which is absolutely wrong in society right now, then just trust the process, and it will show you that it was for all the right reasons, and you're gonna get where you need to get. And I believe that's something that's really hard for most of the people to even process, let alone let it happen. And that's just my personal journey as well inside. I had anxiety because I thought I could control the process better, and I couldn't. And I had to learn that I need to let it go, because otherwise I will just not function. So that was quite a humbling experience throughout my career. And people don't understand, and then that goes back to business, Mike. And I'm gonna just shut up from there.
No,
people ask me,
please
people ask
continue.
me how I handle really, really, really bad things, and they just like, how come you are not stressed out like hell? I'm like, yeah, I learned the hard way. I learned already that if I'm gonna escalate my own stress level just by trying to control what you cannot control, then it's not gonna get anywhere. I'm gonna make things worse than they should be. But if I learn to just dissect things that I cannot control from the things I can control, in fact, and work on only on those things, and trust the process that it will take me in the right direction, then even the toughest business problems can be solved. So that goes back to also how we handle ourselves, not just privately, but also at work, and how we can help each other to not impose more stress on each other as well than what we should experience in general. And that stress should only be that nasty feeling of, holy cow, I'm not going in the right direction. And nature is telling me right now that I'm not going in the right direction.
That was a wonderful description of the journey of being able to find faith in yourself.
Oh yeah,
Well,
and yeah, thank you for summing it up. So
that's what it
well,
was. So, Elsa, what do you think? Are we off base in bringing this correlation between faith in ourselves, or positive self-assessment, and looking at the threat that's out around us, especially vis-a-vis nature?
As Zsofia was talking, I kept thinking of how I started to accept the personal role that nature played in my stress management, if you can call it that. That sounds all as if I'm trying to control it. But for me, I went through a tough few years with health issues, several health issues, and then ended up looking after my parents, who passed away, within 2 years of each other, not too long ago. So it was extremely stressful, and at a level where it's not just physically, fatiguing, but it's also emotionally, it's really draining. And you start sort of losing sight of what is important in life if you're dealing with imminent death, basically, on a daily basis. And so for me, what my husband was very much with me in this process, fortunately. And so we would spend our days in the last bits were at, in looking after someone who's in palliative care, where we ended up not doing the final caring anymore, but had done it up to that point. And then going in and not knowing how long this is going to take still. It could be years. You feel guilty about hoping that it won't be years, because we're so programmed to think, oh, we want people to live forever. And you have to sort of start making peace. And this is all connected to nature, of course. You start making peace with that cycle, that to die is natural. The best you can hope for is a good death, in the sense that it's not traumatic, not painful. And so that is what we should be wishing for our loved ones and for ourselves. And so going through this process, we found that coming out of the room, this place, the palliative care unit, the only way in which we could actually de-stress was to go and sit next to the river and just look at the river. And that became something that really fed us every day. A spoiler alert, that we now live next to the river because we found that it was just something that we craved. And when we were no longer doing that. In any case, but so this was what kept us sane. And it became a situation where, looking at the water birds going about their business every day, here's a swan going past, and just knowing that hundreds of years from now, hopefully, this will still be going on. We won't be here. Our day-to-day worries will no longer be here. It will be totally irrelevant, completely. Thinking about, do we need to buy the bigger wheelchair or the smaller one, is irrelevant and will remain irrelevant. Whereas this swan, or this pair of swans actually reproducing, and their offspring reproducing, and this cycle going on and on, that is what matters. And we are such a speck in this whole big universe. And it's okay. That is what we should be taking our consolation. That's what it should be, is that we don't really matter. We just need to get on with life. Don't cause harm. That's sort of the message that I got out of that. And it was nature that got me through the very, very difficult time.
You mentioned something indirectly, Elsa, that I think another thing I think about a lot is this whole idea of the Anthropocene, that with the human being is the center, and that was something I believe didn't happen from one day to the next. It was progressive, very much tied to philosophy and the idea of dualism. My personal take, going back to Descartes, where he says, well, do I actually exist? Where I think, therefore I am. So that was, for me, that was the first seed of the Anthropocene that was placed. And then we went through the idea of property with John Locke, and then don't even talk about Leviathan. And we just kept going in this direction that we are here. Of course, Leviathan might be the most concrete example of where we believed that we needed to control people and we needed to control everything else. That was the message that Thomas Hobbes was bringing us. But we've continued on this path for a very, very long time. And we have a competition taking place between the United States and China, where I believe that both of these cultures have a very similar way of looking at things, because for me, Chinese culture appears to be very much nature controlling, just looking at the Three Gorges Dam. How do we put this one into reverse with the with the human-centered components? Anybody care to give that one a stab?
I suspect that Zsofia are better qualified to speak on that. My quick view would be that nature's going to teach us a lesson.
Of
I just
course.
wanted to say exactly the same, Elsa, that quite frankly, Mike, as we stand right now, I just don't see people listening to anything really enough to put this in reverse, right? And you know what? Now you mentioned, the Chinese culture and everything. If I look back the ancient Chinese culture, at that culture, right, that was completely the opposite from what they are doing now. And how to make it reverse as we stand with the amount of people who are still on that path of, okay, how can I make more money, more money, more money, because that's all that counts. I think nature will definitely step in, and we started experiencing, and I believe this will continue. Nature will put us back in our place, quite frankly. That's unfortunately, I wish, that people listen more, and I see more and more people and, starting to listen. So I see a positive trend, but it's just not big enough to make that fundamental change at a global scale at the moment. But from what I see already, those people who work in globalized supply chains, and I know it seems to be a little bit far-fetched, but quite frankly, those people who are at my level understanding globalized supply chains and how they've worked so far, they started having that holy guacamole moment saying, okay, we will not be able to control this. That the 2.5 years taught them that they will not control this. And they started believing that if we are not making fundamental changes, i.e. realign with nature and make sure that we are not the center of the universe, but cooperative and part of a bigger scheme, then this will never work. However, that community is still pretty small. So I'm afraid that Elsa, as you said, I mean, I don't think any of us are better qualified. Let's face it. I think nature will qualify that very much for everybody and very soon as we stand. But look, I hope for the best. I try to share as much knowledge as possible. It's just, yeah, I'm like 50-50. I'm on the fence with this, Mike. I don't know at this moment
Okay, no,
where we're gonna
I
go.
didn't mean to put anybody on the spot, but maybe
Oh, good.
a couple of thoughts based on that, Zsofia, what you just mentioned. So you mentioned the pandemic and the role that it played within supply chains, and you might look at it differently, but I believe wholeheartedly that the pandemic is a direct result of this wrong way of looking at things.
Absolutely.
And be it the controlling part or the non-accepting part, or a combination of the two. So in my mind, we have everything still within the kitchen to go ahead and recreate this pandemic, and it can happen like this. So we're really not prepared with something that we're not going to be able to control. That would be the first one. And in comparison to certainly my situation, and please, if I read this one wrong, Elsa, you can correct me, but I think that you are, Zsofia, a little bit more on the firing line, especially dealing with companies directly, where I'm consider myself to be fortunate not to have to deal with that anymore.
Yeah.
But that
I mean,
means that you're on the battleground every day, right?
yeah. Yeah. Pretty much, Mike. Pretty much. I mean, I can only confirm. And when I look at just basic sustainability related efforts, and it's not even regenerative, not even circular economy, right? It's far away from that. And when people start asking questions, clearly having absolutely zero recollection, or they can't even remember as a human being, right? So I somehow came to the conclusion, and I hope that it's not too outlandish to say it like this, but some people still have that, I don't know, a sixth sense, where they are like, something is not right. I don't know what, but something is not right. And then that's the minority, right? Or a few people. And then the others is just like, I don't even care. That's kind of, that sixth sense is just shut down. That's not available anymore. And then those are the ones who are not even willing to think through, why certain things need to be changed. And that's really where I see, that battlefield being really bloody at the moment, because every day I go home and I'm like, I can't believe that we are at this level of understanding. And we are. And we are. And yeah, do I think it's my fault because I shut up for decades? No, obviously not. But equally, I'm like, something bigger is missing. And I know it's not a sixth sense, but somehow that little compass that people should have here, it's just not working. And that's really a problem. And again, back to what Elsa said, very simply, nature will reset that compass. If people are not willing to work on that compass themselves, nature will come in and say, hey, you know what? End of discussion. There's a slap for your compass. And now you are in the right direction, but it's going to be painful. So yeah, battlefield every day. But I see at least the young people, and that's why I think it goes back to what you said, Mike, and that's I think it's part of the depression, and it's part of the issues that the young ones experience quite thoroughly, is that they have that compass. For some reason, we managed to produce a few generations with the young ones where this compass is not that broken, and that compass is literally telling them every day, Mayday, Mayday. And that's why they also experience that immense stress or depression or anxiety every day, because they just see that things, we are driving the ship, towards the cliff, and they just don't feel like that they have enough, I don't know, knowledge, or maybe, I don't know, the power or the energy to redirect that ship. And it's not even control, but it's more about having that, they feel like out of control. That's also true, but they don't know how to get back in control. So I think, Elsa, your amazing example of how people individually could help themselves learn how to let go certain things, and then at the same time gain that new way of living, and lose that earlier way of thinking, that would be really, really important. And I think the young ones would definitely welcome that opportunity to learn.
What I find very interesting at the moment is that I think people, first of all, a lot of people don't take any responsibility because they think they have no power. That's the first thing. They think, oh, if I do something, it's not going to make any difference in any case, so I can just as well do nothing because that's the easiest way. A lot of other people, or the same people often, see it as, it's not my problem. If I have a leader, if my government starts saying this and this is what we're supposed to do, then I will do it. They do not take the responsibility of electing a government that will do those things. And that is because they often feel as if, oh, there is no choice. I think in many countries, the choices are pretty limited. And I don't know who said it, but someone said, and it's something my husband quotes a lot, he's into democracy very strongly. And he talks about America, for example, as basically, it's two factions of the business party. It's not two different parties, those main ones. And so you end up with no choice. And instead of going, actually, I do have a choice, it's my responsibility to make sure that there is an alternative which will make sure that the right things happen. And that, in terms of climate change or whatever the things are that we want to have changed, but just to make those responsible choices, I need to also take on the responsibility to give myself options. And that's a massive thing that's missing. And what I really worry about, so young people, as you say, a lot of them have the right focus in terms of doing the right thing personally, but they've given up on the system. They no longer see it as an option to find the right people to represent them, because that has just been broken for so long. The political systems, democracy itself, isn't functioning as it ought to. And instead of going, okay, well, we need to fix this as well before we can actually try and fix all the other things, people are just going, oh, that's too difficult, and we'll just stay outside of the system, not realizing that you actually then, you can't make laws. So there's no long-term change if you don't first fix the system.
My
Wow.
God, you just said
Yeah,
everything. That's
Not
basically-
only that, I'm gonna what I heard from both of you, starting Zsofia on your comments about, well, nature's going to correct us anyways, and then Elsa looking at it from from a government perspective, how do we do things from human to human, and in losing faith in almost wishing that there would be a calamity, because at least there you would have an excuse to turn the whole thing on its head. So it doesn't even matter if it's coming from an ecological perspective or it's coming from a social perspective. We are waiting for a calamity to be the savior. Whoa, that's a sad statement.
Absolutely, Mike. Sorry, go ahead, Elsa. Go
Yeah,
for it.
and if we look around us, we're in the calamity. How
Correct, yeah.
can we not
Absolutely.
recognize that?
Yeah, and you know what is even worse? And I go directly back to what you said, and I just realized I didn't really segue into that part, but we lost agency, our own self-agency, right? So democracies only work if we put in the effort and we take our responsibilities, not just the perks of being in democracy, right? So people tend to think of democracy, oh, it's really nice, I can do whatever I want, it's freedom. But at the same time, they forget about the obligations and their duty to take the necessary steps to change what they can change. And then nature will supplement what they cannot change, because that's above and beyond them, right? So, but we do have the duty and the responsibility. And I think, Elsa, you said it so well, that people just forgot about that agency that they need to take up to make the change. And it's a fair statement, I believe, that many of the young ones feel like they don't have that because of how long the system was up and running. But also waiting for a calamity that is bigger than the one we are in right now is not going to help, right? So we need to use this calamity or problem, an issue and crisis, and not even the pandemic. It's just a social crisis that we have that could help us gain or regain that agency and start acting in the direction where we should, right? I hope.
That's the key
Yes,
word,
I think that-
agency here. Sorry, go.
Absolutely. Yeah, sorry, Mike. No, so I suspect that if we can sort of wind the system down so that it works at a more community level, and then rebuild it up again, we have a better chance of things working, because you need to know the people that you're working with. You need to understand the local problems first. People help people that they know and that they care about. They struggle to make decisions or to assist people that they don't know and that's foreign to them. That's in a way, that's the sort of definition of racism, isn't it? That the fear of the unknown is what causes that. So if you can work with your local community and find solutions for the smaller problems within your community, let's say, our river here, this bit gets polluted. Why? Which businesses are causing that? How can we work with them on a friendly basis to try and solve it? Can we maybe put someone there to monitor what's happening? Can we ask for volunteers to come and fix the problem over weekends? While someone's looking after the children, all of those typical community things. If we can go back to that level, then I think there's hope in fixing things. Whereas if we're just sitting here waiting for the very well-paid politicians who are completely out of touch with what's happening in our communities, nothing is going to get better.
Can only agree there. Can I mention
can't
one thing
top
here,
that one.
Mike? Yeah, absolutely. I cannot top it either. I just think there's a really good supplement, hopefully good supplementary note here that and that's where living in Switzerland comes in play, Mike, because here democracy as such, as far as the extent goes, is being represented by a multitude of parties, right? So they don't have the two-party system or a single-party system. They need to have every segment of society represented in parliament and in those people that represent the masses. And on top of that, they also have that public vote that they do on every single matter, where the people really have not just the opportunity, but the obligation to submit their votes on critical matters to society, either at the local level or at the state level. And you can hear cis people complaining about the fact that many people, the younger ones or immigrants, they don't understand that it's not just an opportunity, but an obligation as well. But when it's understood, when it comes to really critical questions like, for instance, abortion rights earlier, or voting rights, or do we buy, fighter jets or whatever. I mean, I'm just mentioning, those that made the news headlines, right? Also outside of Switzerland, but there are a multitude or myriads of voting opportunities. They do their duty, and even if the state's governance and then the government itself does not like the outcome, that is the direct reflection of society. And what they have there is a feedback. So they either learn that something was not well communicated, or people didn't understand, or they are downright against it or for it. So I believe if we could, and that goes back to what you said, Elsa, directly, that if we could replicate somehow that structure, that it really builds from the ground up, grassroots, and then keep that strong at the local level, and then only take certain decisions up to the state level where we have proper representation of society, obviously, which are really big issues that everybody is impacted by, then it could really work. And I'm not saying this is the best way forward, because the biggest criticism against this type of way of working is that it's slow, or, but at the same time, I also say, how do we define slow? If something takes for a long time for a nation to go through to vote either or, then that's the level of understanding, and that's the speed of processing by the people of that community. So, and that goes directly back to what you said, that we need to, sorry, Mike, go for it. Yeah, I think it's just immense.
I have to comment on what you just said,
Please.
especially if we look at the prevailing thoughts coming out of Silicon Valley that go ahead, move quickly and break something, then we see exactly where that has taken us. And so I question to what degree whether quickness, we can come up with a correlation between quickness and quality. I really question that one. Sorry, I had to jump on I had to jump on this.
With you.
I had to jump on the soapbox. Sorry about that.
So that makes absolute sense, because if you look at, nature has a pace for things, and it does it at the right pace. It doesn't allow people to prescribe it. There is a pace at which things work, and certain cycles are quick, certain cycles take many years. and that's the way we should also look at our politics. Something I wanted to just say, you were talking about Switzerland, and I often this is a topic that I quite enjoy talking about, as you might have noticed, is politics. And one of the things is that the reason our politics tend to be in such terrible shape is that we elect the wrong people, but it's because we attract the wrong people. It's a celebrity culture. We're no longer interested in people who actually do the work that needs to be done for the right reasons, which is to help other people, to represent people, and then to do the best for them. People end up there because they like the money and they like the celebrity status. In Switzerland, as far as I understand it, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, they're seen almost as public servants.
Correct,
That huge
yes.
celebrity status is not there. And I think that is the way to go with politics, is you do not want the person who makes these very important very important decisions for the country to be making it so that he can get a moment on TV and look important and see how many clicks he can get. That's not the reason we want them there. And so they don't necessarily attract the kind of people who are there for attention. They're not the attention seekers. They are actually really there because they want to make a difference, hopefully.
Yeah. I mean, sorry, Mike, can I just add one thing here for Elsa, for just for the record? Of course, there are people from time to time who are attention seekers that get to that level, but quite frankly, that's why I like the fact that that's a multi-party setup, because even now there is very much a lot of criticism about one or two of the individuals who are in the party who went into that direction, and people started immediately saying, okay, well, you're not here to be a celebrity, my friend, you're here to serve us. So let's see, for that you need that self or that personal agency for people to step up and say, hey, you're out of line here. Sorry, Mike, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to make sure I needed to add a disclaimer to our conversation that we are not being sponsored by the Swiss National Tourist Office, just to make that disclaimer.
Not at all, not at all. And I'm also an immigrant, right? So
yeah,
I'm not even voting. So it comes from someone who's not voting, right? So I just try to give a kind of an overview. And
I thought I would add that piece of levity.
Very good. Thank you,
appreciate
Mike.
it. Maybe it's that I realized that we will need to come to a conclusion, but there was one comment that I would like to make, and this would be my final one, tied to something that both of you discussed in this. Very often it's cloaked as being freedom and responsibility, that for us to have the freedom means that we need to take the responsibility, which is full agreement. But I think I've come to the conclusion there's another component that comes into this mix that has everything to do with our subject matter, and that would be constraints. And you triggered it, Zsofia, when you were talking about Switzerland, because one of the key components of Switzerland is that they have no natural resources, or very few. Water, you could say, is a natural resource, but that's about it. Certainly not the traditional ones. It's very rugged terrain. So to be a farmer in Switzerland means that it's almost Herculean to be able to manage that. So within that freedom of choice means that we need to be able to manage things within the constraints that we have. And I think this has everything to do with our subject matter when looking at it from a nature controlling or a nature accepting perspective. If you accept those constraints, that means you are accepting the cards that you have received. Am I wrong?
Oh, you're right, completely. Could not agree more there, Mike. And I think it's true, right? We all hear it from some of the successful people that, again, I'm not I'm not favoring people who are celebrities. I like those who keep it quiet. But some of them actually said, well, if you're making the most of the cards that you're dealt with, than you got in your deck. And even if they are the shittiest cards you can get, but you make the most of them, you're going to be happy. So yeah, I think that goes back to what you said, Mike. Just to wrap it up, we need to learn that we are part of a system, nature system, and then move from there again. And everything we said so far during these different parts of the discussion, I believe we can make it work. It's just we need that mental understanding and proceed from there. Easier said than done, of course, but yeah, let's hope that before nature really strikes a chord in that direction to reset everybody, we will get to at least a good level of understanding and start working in the right direction.
And now, dearest Elsa, we leave you with the last words.
Yes, I think that discussions like these can make a difference. Even if it only makes a difference to us, then we will be sort of radiating that positivity, hopefully, out, and the understanding that we fit into a much bigger system. And I think it was Zsofia who said that there's no real hierarchy. It is just all part of a big network. We're trying to make this all work by not controlling, or not even attempting to control, but accepting and respecting. That's for me the biggest thing, just respecting what's going on around us. And I really hope that people will step up and in the structures that are available to us, do what we can and try and fix those structures to the point where we can make positive differences without being controlling, but respectful, basically. Just that's my main hope